Welcome back, everybody. It is Friday, April 17th, 2026. We left off on Luke 22, verse 47, so that's where we pick it up. Blah blah blah. Betrayal and arrest of Jesus. While he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Oh, that's interesting. So in the other Gospels, it does not say that Jesus actually healed the man, which is crazy. So they still arrested him, even seeing him do this miracle, like right in front of them. Then Jesus said to the chief priest and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. Peter denies Jesus, verse 54. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, this man also was with him. But he denied it, saying, Woman, I do not know him. And a little later someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, Man, I am not. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean. But Peter said, Man, I do not know what you are talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, Prophesy, who is it that struck you? And they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council, and they said, If you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. So they all said, Are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, You say that I am. Then they said, What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. Luke 23, verse 1. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this man misleading our nation, and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, You have said so. Then Pilate said to the chief priest and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. But they were urgent, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priest and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. Okay. In Luke 23, 11 through 12, what was the basis for the friendship kindling between Herod and Pilate? In the account found in Luke 23:11 through 12, the sudden friendship between Herod and Pontius Pilate is a fascinating case of political networking born out of a shared high-stakes problem. Before this moment, the two leaders were bitter rivals. While the Bible doesn't detail every grievance, historical context and hints in Luke 13:1 suggest tension over jurisdictional boundaries and Pilate's previous slaughter of Galilean subjects who were under Herod's oversight. The kindling of their friendship was rooted in two primary factors: mutual deference. By sending Jesus to Herod, Pilate acknowledged Herod's authority over Galilee. Conversely, by sending Jesus back to Pilate without passing a final sentence, Herod signaled respect for Pilate's ultimate judicial power in Jerusalem. All right. A shared target. Both men found themselves in a difficult position regarding Jesus. By mocking him together, Herod through his soldiers' ridicule and Pilate through the eventual sentencing, they found a common ground. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah. But isn't it so that Pilate found no guilt in Jesus and didn't necessarily view him as an enemy, but rather wanted to offload that from his plate? So it would seem getting Jesus back from Herod would not necessarily be a welcomed event, let alone enough to spawn a friendship. You're right. From a purely logistical standpoint, getting Jesus back was a return to sender that Pilate didn't want. However, the friendship didn't spark because the problem was solved. It sparked because the recognition of status and the shared burden. I guess so. The gesture of deference. In the ancient Roman and Near Eastern world, politics was driven by honor and shame. Well, okay, that's fine. I mean, whatever. They're not the important bit here. Okay, so verse 13. Pilate then called together the chief priest and the rulers and the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him." So Pilate gets Jesus back and then tells them still, I don't find him guilty of any of the accusations that you're bringing against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. Which is interesting, right? Because they beat him and mocked him, but still acted with some level of integrity. Like they didn't just want to kill him. So that's interesting. Well, ultimately they did sentence him to death, but okay. So, but they all, verse 18, but they all cried out together, "Away with this man and release to us Barabbas." a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. And as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross, to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breast that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" So this is also unique to, this was not in the other Gospels. So this is, let's definitely do a breakdown on this. Explain Luke 23, 28 through 31. In this passage, Jesus is on his way to the crucifixion. As a crowd follows him, including women who are mourning and wailing, Jesus turns to them with a startling prophetic warning. Rather than seeking pity for his own suffering, he redirects their grief toward the future judgment coming upon Jerusalem. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breast that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" The key themes and meaning of this, the first, the reversal of blessing. In Jewish culture of the time, being barren was considered a great sorrow or even a reproach. By saying people would soon call the barren blessed, Jesus is highlighting the sheer horror of the coming Roman siege of Jerusalem, which occurred 70 years later, 70 AD. The message: the days would be so dark that those without children would be lucky because they wouldn't have to watch their children suffer from famine or war. Desperation and judgment. Jesus quotes Hosea 10:8, describing a level of terror where people would prefer to be buried alive by mountains than face the judgment at hand. It signifies an overwhelming desire to hide from the wrath of the consequences following the rejection of the Messiah. The analogy of the green and dry wood. Excuse me. This is a proverbial saying that serves as the punchline of his warning. The element of green wood symbolizes Jesus himself. He is alive, righteous, and innocent. Element of dry wood symbolizes the spiritually rebellious nation, Jerusalem. They are dead in sin and ready for burning. I still kind of don't get it. The logic: if the Roman authorities and the current system are willing to burn, i.e. execute, someone like Jesus, who is innocent and full of life, the green wood, how much more severely will the fire of judgment consume a city that is spiritually dead and rebellious, the dry wood? Oh, okay. Well, now, okay. That makes perfect sense. Dang, Jesus was, it's deep. If the Roman authorities and the current system are willing to burn someone like Jesus, who is innocent and full of life, how much more severely will the fire of judgment consume a city that is spiritually dead and rebellious? That's interesting. Um, wow. Yeah, so Jesus shows profound selflessness even while carrying the cross. His heart is heavy for the people who will suffer the consequences of the path they are on. He is essentially saying, don't cry for the one who is dying to save the world. Cry for those who refuse to be saved. Dang. What was I going to ask? Oh, yeah. So, why did the Romans end up turning on the Jews? Aside from it being God's plan, that is. The Romans didn't just wake up one day and decide to destroy Jerusalem. The turning was the result of a decades-long pressure cooker of religious friction, economic greed, and a full-scale Jewish revolution that humiliated the Roman military. The event in 70 AD was the climax of the First Jewish-Roman War. So it lasted a while, 66 through 73 AD. Here's the breakdown of why the relationship collapsed so violently. The corruption of Gessius Florus. The immediate spark was the Roman procurator, aka the governor, Gessius Florus. Unlike some previous governors who tried to respect Jewish customs, Florus was notoriously corrupt. In 66 AD, he seized 17 talents, which we learned a talent was like representative of a day laborer's annual salary, so what they would make like in a year. So that would be a lot of money. He seized 17 talents from the temple treasury, claiming it was for the emperor. When Jews protested, some mockingly passed around a basket to collect pennies for the poor, starving governor. Enraged, Florus sent troops into Jerusalem to plunder the city, killing over 3,600 people and even crucifying high-ranking Jewish citizens who were also Roman citizens. Dang. The point of no return. After the massacre, the Jewish resistance, led by the Zealots, drove the Roman garrison out of Jerusalem. The temple priests made the official decision to stop the daily sacrifices for the Roman emperor. In the ancient world, stopping these sacrifices was a formal declaration of rebellion. Rome sent the governor of Syria, Cestes Gallus, with the 12th Legion to crush the revolt. In a shocking upset, the Jewish rebels ambushed them at the pass of Beth Horon, nearly wiping out the entire legion. For Rome, this was no longer a local riot. It was a humiliation that threatened the stability of the entire empire. They had to make an example of Judea. The siege of 70 AD. Emperor Nero sent his best general, Vespasian, and his son Titus to retake the province. By the time they reached Jerusalem in 70 AD, the city was a tinderbox. So there's civil war. Inside the walls, the rival Jewish factions were fighting each other. So they were fighting each other and the Romans. Wow. They even burned each other's food supplies to force everyone to fight, leading to a horrific famine. Passover crowds. The Romans began the siege during Passover. They allowed pilgrims into the city but wouldn't let them out, effectively trapped hundreds of thousands of people to deplete the food faster. The temple's fate. According to the historian Josephus, Titus wanted to spare the temple as a trophy, but a soldier threw a torch into the sanctuary. The resulting fire was so intense that the gold in the walls melted into the cracks of the stones. Why was it so brutal? The Romans turned with such ferocity because they viewed the Jews as uniquely stubborn. Most conquered nations eventually assimilated or stayed quiet after a defeat, but the Jewish commitment to monotheism meant they would never bow to a Roman god emperor. To the Romans, the total destruction of the temple and the city was the only way to break the spirit and the rebellion once and for all. This is why, as you noted in Luke 23, Jesus warned that the dry wood, the rebellious city, would be consumed by a fire far worse than the one he was facing. So this is interesting because obviously if this was the root of the new covenant and then Christianity all the way up until now, but at this time, I guess that's the question to ask. Who were the Romans worshiping? Because now we have the Roman Catholic Church, which they're Christians. So let's ask that because that's interesting. So at this time, who were the Romans worshiping? Who was their god? And how did we go from this point to having a Roman Catholic Church? In 70 AD, the religious landscape of Rome was a crowded marketplace of gods. The transition from that pagan world to the Roman Catholic Church is one of the most dramatic shifts in human history, which is also interesting too, because that's kind of how I guess that's more or less the way that the Bible, or not more or less, it is the way the Bible said it would go. It would pass to Gentiles, like non-Jewish people. I never thought about that. That's really interesting. Part 1. So who were the Romans worshiping then? Unlike the Jews, who were monotheistic, one God, the Romans were polytheistic. Their religion was less about faith and more about pactum, a contract. If you perform the right rituals, the gods would grant the state prosperity. The Olympian pantheon, they worshipped the Consentes, 12 major gods adapted from the Greeks. Oh, that's right. Okay, so we get into all this: Jupiter, Mars, Venus, all that nonsense. Imperial cult, the god emperor. By 70 AD, the most politically important god was the emperor. Starting with Augustus, deceased emperors were often deified. Living emperors were often worshipped as the Son of God or Lord. The conflict: Romans didn't care if Jews or Christians worshipped their own god, as long as they also burned incense to the emperor. Which is also interesting. You would think, well, it's just that's a cultural nuance I wouldn't expect. Christians and Jews refused, which the Romans viewed as treason, not just heresy. Part 2, from pagan Rome to the Catholic Church. How did a persecuted underground movement of Jesus followers become the official state religion of the empire that tried to kill it? Yeah, that's the real question I had. It happened in 3 major phases. The period of persecution, so 33 to 313 AD. So it started before 70 AD. For nearly 300 years, Christianity was illegal. Oh, no, okay, it didn't start. This was still, period of persecution. So in this time, it did not start. For nearly 300 years, Christianity was illegal. However, it grew rapidly because it offered something Roman paganism didn't: equality and hope. In Roman religion, the gods only cared about the elites. Christianity welcomed women, slaves, and the poor, and provided a social safety net, caring for the sick during plagues. Then there was the Constantine pivot, 313 AD. The turning point was Emperor Constantine. Before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, he claimed to see a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." The Edict of Milan. Constantine legalized Christianity. It was no longer a crime to be a Christian. Council of Nicaea. Constantine brought bishops together to standardize Christian belief, producing the Nicene Creed. This began the formal institutionalization of the church. The Edict of Thessalonica, 380 AD. While Constantine favored Christianity, Emperor Theodosius, let's call him Theo. Emperor Theo, Emperor Theo I made it the exclusive state religion of the Roman Empire. Oh, okay. He banned pagan sacrifices and closed temples. The Roman administrative structure, provinces and dioceses, was adopted by the church. Interesting. The Bishop of Rome, the Pope, eventually took on the title Pontifex Maximus, a title formerly held by the Roman high priest / emperor. Summary of the shift. The Roman Catholic Church is essentially the marriage of Christian theology and Roman organizational genius. First, Roman, it kept the language Latin, the hierarchy, diocese and parishes, and the legalistic structure of the empire. Catholic, this word means universal, reflecting the church's goal to be the one faith for the entire world. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. That's what that means. Okay. It is one of history's great ironies. The emperor that executed Jesus eventually became the vehicle that spread his name to the ends of the earth. Yeah, isn't that something? That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Okay. Okay, so back to the scripture. So verse 32. 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right, one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, okay, in Luke 23:34, who is Jesus praying for? In Luke 23:34, Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The them in this prayer primarily refers to the people directly involved in his crucifixion, though the scope can be understood in a few different layers. The Roman soldiers. Most immediately, Jesus is praying for the Roman soldiers who were physically carrying out the execution. In the moments surrounding this statement, the soldiers were casting lots for his clothing and overseeing the crucifixion. Because they were simply following orders and likely viewed Jesus as just another criminal, they knew not what they do in a literal sense. They didn't realize they were executing the Son of God. The Jewish leaders and the crowd. This actually brings up an interesting point, so I'm going to save that. The Jewish leaders and the crowd. The prayer also extends to the religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, and the crowd who called for his death. While they were the ones who instigated the trial, Peter later echoes this sentiment in Acts 3:17, saying, I know that you acted in ignorance, as did also your rulers. That's really interesting because I mean, they saw him commit miraculous acts. So to say that it was out of ignorance is a stretch for me. So maybe I want to ask about that instead. And then humanity at large. But let's ask about this. Given the below, how is it reconciled that they acted out of ignorance, having seen all the miracles that Jesus performed in front of them and hearing all his teaching? That one kind of throws me a little for a loop there. The tension between seeing miracles and acting in ignorance is one of the most profound themes in the New Testament. Reconciling these two involves looking at the difference between intellectual knowledge, seeing the facts, and spiritual recognition, understanding who he truly was. Here's how theologians and biblical scholars generally reconcile this. There's willful blindness versus total ignorance. Ignorance in the biblical sense isn't always a lack of information. It can be a hardening of the heart. Okay, all right. I suppose I have to. I mean, so and this is one of the things too that like obviously the AI doesn't know everything. I use the AI more so to like because the Bible's been around for so long, it's obviously had lots of training data on it. And when I ask it questions, I don't necessarily accept everything that it says as like gospel fact, although most of its insights are pretty good. But I don't think I necessarily agree with this one. So maybe I just want to make a mental note of that, or I just want to say that out loud, that it's not necessarily always correct, because that just doesn't feel right to me. So its interpretations, I guess what I'm saying is, or shouldn't always be taken as like absolutely the truth, because that doesn't really sit with me. I don't know about that. So I'm not going to read it. Okay, so let's just go back to the scripture. Two other, where was I? Verse 34. Oh, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. I always love that part. I think that's so badass. But it's also interesting because the conversation didn't go like that in the other gospels. Although I like this version better, just from a encouragement standpoint. But and I think this is also interesting too, because it also answers the question, because I think people, including myself, wonder this, and the answer is yes. But the question is, can somebody really go their whole life willfully sinning, openly sinning, and then just at the last moment, right before your death, like this guy on the cross, this was literally his last moments. He was already crucified, and he was going to die soon, by way of the crucifixion, a slow, painful death, and he was saved. So I mean, the answer is yes, but I guess the dangerous part of living that way, though, is you can't bank on that, right? Not everybody, like, we don't know when we're gonna die. That's kind of the issue there. He knew when he was gonna die, and he had Jesus right in front of him, and Jesus decided to save his soul because he asked. But we don't have that benefit, so it's a very dangerous game to play. But anyway, we hit our 30-minute mark, so we'll pick this up tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow I won't be doing a read tomorrow. My family's in town, so we'll pick it up Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday night. So we'll pick it up on Luke 23:44. So don't forget to drop a sub, share it with a friend. God bless you guys, and good night.